All right, welcome everybody. Always excited to be here and looking forward to your questions and interactions here. So um, I was thinking about my original intention with this webinar, and that's to give um, skills, thoughts, perspectives that can help you be more effective. Oh, looks like that didn't come through.
Oh, it did. You can't see this?
Well, I can, but the words were supposed to be somewhere else.
Oh,
Did that send you the Word document, not the PDF?
I didn't look. So let me stop sharing and I'll go look while you continue
I'm
on.
sorry. Let me get you. Oh, that should be a PDF.
It is a PDF. Let me go back to see if I can just get the image differently. So
You might have to make sure it shows in a PDF viewer. Anyway, I was thinking about my original intention is to give skills and perspectives that will help you be more effective in your relationships from day one in your recovery. So a long time ago, I shared something like this, and we're going to revisit it because today we're going to talk about how to actually talk about your feelings and how to actually share your feelings with another person. The reason why this is on my mind is I see with a lot of the couples that I work with, people can think they're sharing their feelings and they're not. They're criticizing, or they're backstreet driving, or they're sharing their thoughts, or they're sharing their thoughts on what they think should happen. So we're going to break it down and we're going to look at what feelings actually are. There it is. We're going to look at what feelings actually are and what it means to share your feelings. So a little bit of background before we get to this cascade here. You have to make it simple. Your brain has a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. Your right hemisphere generally is there's more innervation with the body. So you have more neurons going from the right hemisphere into the body. We tend to think of the right hemisphere as more of the like creative, emotionally connected side of things. You have your left hemisphere, which is more what we think about when we think of like the frontal cortex, like the master regulator. It controls things, it organizes things. Your right and left hemisphere are always communicating. They're always doing this back and forth. One of the jobs of the left hemisphere is to act as a circuit breaker for the right when things get too intense for us. So this is that whole idea, those of you who are in any kind of recovery, that whole idea of like, hey, you're in your head, come back into your body. That's what that whole idea is. That doesn't mean that something is broken in you. It means that you have experienced a lot of threat, a lot of danger of being in your body, and your left hemisphere is really good at coming in during emotional or distressing times and regulating things. For example, of thoughts like it would be easier if we weren't together when you and your spouse are in a tough spot. There may be some validity to exploring, do I want to be here? There's also a really normal reason why when things get intense, you would start thinking, do I even want to do this? Or I don't want to do this with this person. We don't mean it. And we can feel really awful about it. Because when the intensity clears, we may feel guilty that we thought like, what's wrong with me? I could just throw this away. That's actually your left hemisphere coming in and trying to bring order to something that's really chaotic and overwhelming. So that's the basis, that's the foundation of why I think people have a hard time sharing their feelings, because there is so much left hemisphere interjection. There is so much left hemisphere trying to order and control, because it is a really scary thing. It is a really vulnerable thing to be just right side, to be just in our feelings, just in our sensations. So sharing our feelings is a right brain experience. And if you want to take that even a step further, sharing feelings with another person is a right brain to right brain experience, not a right to left or a left to left. So it requires both people to be very right brain oriented. This is where, and I'm sure we'll get in the Q&A, things like I do what you're talking about with my spouse, and they always feel like I'm criticizing, or they always feel like, these aren't your feelings, you're trying to control me. I want you to keep in mind, again, it takes a right brain to right brain. So be thinking, if you want to improve this part of your relationships, not only do you have to get better at sharing from the right brain, you also have to be good at receiving from the right brain. So this is where I'll often tell couples, don't listen to the words your partner is saying, look at what they're feeling. Look at the feeling that the words convey to you. Again, that's a right brain to right brain. Or even just saying, go inside your own body and notice how you feel when your partner says this to you. And instead of coming out in attack, you might say, my fists are getting clenched and I'm getting angry as I hear this. Are you feeling any of that? Probably about 90% of the time, whatever you feel in your body, your partner will say, yeah, that's totally what's going on for me. Because two human beings that are in a room and are in an interaction long enough, they sync up to each other. We feel things, we take things on that we don't realize consciously left brain. Our body does this syncing up through mirror neurons, through, it's a very deep form of attunement that we do for safety. So let's go through this cascade and we'll talk about where right brain and left brain is. So everything that happens that comes out as an action for you, it starts as an event. The event can be something external. It can be, the mailman bent my delivery of photos. That can be an event. The event can be I woke up sick. There's a difference also between events and situations. Events are time limited, beginning, middle, and end. So again, the event, the mailman delivered my photos bent, that's an event. A situation is the mailman always destroys my deliveries, he puts them in the gutter, not the mailbox. So the situations are ongoing. It's hard to tell when it started or when it stopped. It's chronic. Events are more discrete. Whether the event is external or internal, the very first way it's going to register is in your body. There will be a sensation. So let's say that I wake up sick. The feeling in my body, maybe I notice I'm not breathing easily, or my stomach hurts, or I have a headache. There's a sensation in the body first. I have the dotted line here because I think that's where right brain stops and left brain begins. So again, the right brain is very in the moment. It's very, I'm responding to what's happening to me. I'm not giving a lot of thought. So what comes in next after a sensation, you almost can't help it. Well, I would say you can't help it. You will have a thought, you'll have a judgment about it. So let's say, this is a really extreme example, but let's say that you're a survivor of stomach cancer and you wake up one morning and your stomach is upset and you feel that nausea or you feel some pain. Your first thought may be, oh crap, it's back. I've got cancer again. That would be a really reasonable thought. Thoughts are left brain and thoughts are laden with judgment. All of our language, just about all of our language, is laden with some kind of judgment. This is good, this is bad. That's the most basic form of judgment. So your thoughts, your initial cognitive reaction to what's happening organically or somatically, implicitly in your body without your control, your thoughts will have a lot to do with what you feel, what your emotion is. So again, in the example, you wake up with an upset stomach, crap, the cancer's back. Your emotion is probably going to be panicky. It's probably going to be scared. You might feel yourself shut down. Versus you wake up and you notice your stomach is upset and you say, ooh, I think I ate something bad. Again, same sensation, different thought pattern, totally different emotion, right? Could be annoyed. Well, I guess I'm going to have a day where I can't do much. Or the emotion might be, I'm angry. This place I got food last night always does this to me. I don't know why I keep going back. So thoughts, what our left brain does, where our left brain goes, has a lot to do with what happens next because of the judgment. that we put on it. And then, of course, our emotions motivate our actions. If you wake up and you think it's stomach cancer, you might get right on the phone with your oncologist. You might start weeping. If you think it's food poisoning, you might pull the covers up and turn off the light and sleep a little bit more because you know it's going to be a lost day anyway. So all of this is to say, when you want to share your feelings, when you want to share your emotions, it's best to stay on the upper page side of the dotted line. Because anything else is not your feelings, it's your thoughts, it's your judgments. It's the you could look at emotions as the combination of the sensation and the judgment. It's not that those aren't important, but it takes a high degree of collaboration between two people to safely say to another person, well, tell me what you think about that. And to actually allow the person to say what they think, and to do that in a way where they feel safe doing it. So we're talking very, very basic, just sharing feelings. So in order to do that, you stay with the sensations in your body. I feel really nervous right now. My stomach just dropped. I'm upset, and I can tell I'm upset because I want to cry right now. And to give some reference with the event, when you said what you said about my mother, or when you called me names, when you told me I was controlling, or you told me that I was out to get you, I felt this thing come up inside me. It made me feel sick. It made me feel sad. It made me feel angry. I can tell that I'm angry because my head is hot and I want to yell. That's what sharing feelings is. That's the basic building block to be able to go from feelings to connection to mutual solutions to helping each other. But a lot of times I'll see our tendency is to bypass the sensations because they're really vulnerable, especially if you're trying to keep the judgment out of it. Oh, my stomach is upset and I don't actually know what that means yet. I have to explore more with you. I know what my brain says it could be. I know what I'm worried it might be. There's a lot of vulnerability in sharing our emotions. So a word on vulnerability. Again, vulnerability goes two ways. There's the vulnerability you feel in sharing. I don't know if you're going to care, or I don't know if you'll do a good job with this, or I don't know if this is going to start a fight. There's also the way that we're all wired, or we're all prone to react to vulnerability. Some people naturally, honestly, they get really curious and they get soft and they get nurturing when they see vulnerability. For other people, I'm actually one of these. My upbringing, my childhood taught me that when vulnerability was out, I was going to be on the hook for a lot. So I bristle at vulnerability natively. My first impulse with vulnerability, especially in my intimate relationships, is to push it away, to shut it down. So understanding that our feelings are vulnerable, that they are vulnerabilities, it's a good idea to know how you respond to vulnerability. So just like I want to push away everybody else's vulnerabilities, I want to push away my own too. It's important for me to know that. Because without me recognizing this comes automatically, this is what I do, I may not stop to think, is that best for me here? Fortunately, in my recovery at this point, when I do have that push away my own vulnerability come up, I have another voice come up in my head very quickly that says, I think you've experienced enough to know it goes better when you share your vulnerability. So take a deep breath and take a risk. I wouldn't be at that point if I couldn't know and accept in the first place that I want to push away. I would actually see it as all one continuous thing. Well, you said this and that made me mad and I want to push you away. No, it's you said this and I felt your vulnerability, or I felt my own vulnerability and I want to push that away. So it's also important to know your partner's style in how they respond to vulnerability. Not so that you can make excuses for them, or so that you can be, depressed. Well, my partner always pushes it away. But so that you can, number one, contextualize their responses. No, this is normally how you go out of the gate. That might give you some patience or some persistence to try again. There may also be some benefit in understanding how the way you do vulnerability might be scary or overwhelming or triggering for your partner. This isn't a matter of like who's right. It's a matter of, are we doing this together or not? So when you understand your partner's reaction, you can bring your vulnerability out with an assist as well. I know this is really hard for you to hear, and I know that you get overwhelmed. I want you to breathe deep with me and stay with me, because I really want you to be with me on this. Can you hear me out? A lot of times, even just that little preamble is enough to nudge your partner's nervous system in another direction, because they'll know, oh, you're looking out for me. This isn't where you abandoned me. This isn't where I'm alone. You're getting careful with me, and vice versa. So a practical skill, and then a closing thought. A practical skill when it comes to sharing your feelings. If you're very, very new to this, start with a formula like this. When you or I, because remember the event, it can be an internal one or it can be an external one. When you, let's say you're talking to your mailman, when you put my photos in my mailbox and you folded them in half, when I saw that, my heart sunk. It made me feel sad. It made me feel angry. The formula is really, really important, because again, a lot of people will think I'm sharing my feelings when I say, well, you bent my photos and that was wrong. That's not sharing your feelings. That's taking someone to task for their actions. And sometimes that's necessary, but it's not sharing feelings, so don't mistake it. Or even more to the point with mail, when I saw that my photos were bent, I was really sad. I was looking forward to getting those. And now I can't hang them on the wall. I'm upset about that. And again, remember, stop. It's best if you're just basic building blocks of sharing feelings, stop at the dotted line. I give you reference to what happened and I tell you what comes up in my body about it. That doesn't mean that's the end of the conversation. This is not a complete conversation. This is just a step one. So again, and remember, if you're sharing feelings and you feel on the attack, or you feel impervious, or you feel like I'm not slowing down on a runaway train, that's probably an indication that you don't have a lot of vulnerability going on. And that's not sharing feelings. Really sharing feelings, it's opening up the armor and saying, take a look at this. Anything else is something else than sharing feelings. And it is okay to open up the armor and then choose to close it up quick. You don't have to leave yourself hanging out there, especially in a situation that is dangerous or abusive. But it's truer, it's more accurate data when you put your real feelings out there versus your defensives, or you could say manipulations or coaxing or whatever. So then a closing thought here. A lot of the couples that I work with are more comfortable sharing feelings after there's been a problem than they are sharing feelings that are positive. So it goes both ways, because we do and our partners do stuff all the time that bring up sensations that are really pleasant, or we're grateful for, or we love to feel. So it would be important to ask yourself, do I share the positive feelings too? I saw a master class in this just the other day with a couple that I'm working with. They had a check-in on their therapeutic separation. And I watched this betrayed spouse do a really, really good job. At most of the focus was on here's the concerns I have with your current performance of my boundaries. And also, she was not shy in saying, hey, when you did this the other day, that was awesome. That made me feel like you saw me. That made me feel heard. I can tell that you're working hard when you do stuff like that. It made me feel grateful. I felt relieved. So ask yourself, if you are in a relationship right now that's besought by a lot of negative emotion and fights over it, do you share the positive stuff too? Is there positive stuff to share? If there's not, that's probably something to think about. But it goes both ways. It can be really powerful both ways. Emotions just aren't to be dealt with when they're an annoyance to us. They're also something that adds really rich texture to our life. I'll just say in my recovery, it was a turning point when with sponsors and supportive people, I could look them in the eye and say, I'm so grateful for you right now. Or I just want you to know I love you so much. Thank you for showing up for me. Those were turning points for me. It's part of how I learned to give light and air to parts of my heart that I had locked away. That's vulnerable too. I have a colleague who says I love you is just as confrontational as I hate you.
Mm.
And it's important, I think, in addiction recovery, whether you're an addict or you're a spouse, to work on your confrontation skills, because you need them. You need them to be a wholehearted, integrated person. So that's sharing feelings.
Great. So I was thinking, because you talked about you're bristly, like you want to bristle, and so knowing what somebody else's style is. But I thought also it's I don't know, but I'm wondering, are partners more likely to be both bristly, or are they one of them more likely to be wanting to lean in? I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say there's not a formula. I mean, as far as that goes, I've seen couples of all configurations.
Hmm.
And the important thing is not to go on an assumption. Well, if I bristle, my partner must be soft, but to actually find out. I was working with a couple just this morning, and I told them you're both islandy. You both are really comfortable doing things on your own. And they
Not in
said,
a good way, islandy.
well, yeah,
So,
and they said, well, then who does the pursuing? And I said, neither one of you, because you don't like to. That doesn't feel natural to you. So the configurations can be, they're infinite. What's important is you find out what's true about your partner, and not necessarily general rules of thumb.
yeah, well, and the vulnerability of just being willing. And I thought it was interesting when you were talking to you about, like, okay, I could be vulnerable, but then if it isn't safe, to close that up. And I think when you talked about, like, I know that your natural tendency is to bristle. Can we talk about this? And I think it's fair to go, yes, because now that person is made in a safe space, or like, no, I'm so overwhelmed with everything else, but I hear you. And
Yeah.
yeah, but just owning that, okay, not right now, but let me take care of all of the stuff that's going on or whatever, and then then I'll come back to you. But
That makes me think another really important skill set in sharing feelings is recognizing not every feeling has to be resolved or dealt with right now. But that ability to put it on the table, hey, this is happening for me. Can we deal with this at some point? And then as a partner, being able to respond with either yes, right now, let's do it. Or even when you're sharing the emotion, I'm not ready to deal with this now, but I want you to know so that we can get ready to deal with it. That pressure of we've got to fix it right now, that's an almost a 100% guarantee that you will do a bad job. It's best to get at this stuff when it's not we've got to fix this right now, but more when we can get at it from we're in a place where we can really understand this, and we can understand what's happening for us.
Yeah, and I think it is so critically important, like you said, to share the positive too, because if it's every time I bring a feeling to you, Jon, it's going to be like it's a problem. And, like, I would want to bristle pretty easily about that too. But if it's like, wow, we're sharing in a real and meaningful way, and there are positives, even if they're incremental, little baby steps, like, well, that gives me hope that we can move forward in a different way. So,
Yeah.
okay. So we've got some questions. I have been sober for 20 months from porn and all the lies and deceit that comes with that. My wife and I come in and out of a relationship, but she has decided to stay. And I thank you for these webinars that have been helpful for us. My wife wanted to divorce my mom before I even my wife wanted to divorce my mom before I even disclosed to her the nature of my addiction. My wife tells me that she is scared, but not of me acting out, but of my mother and her fear that I will choose my mother. My mother and I betrayed my wife by holding secrets from my wife about a past relationship that I had before I met my wife. In the last 2 years, I have seen my mother 3 times, and we've asked my mother for an apology, and my mother has given only a mediocre apology recently. My mom lives locally and she still asks frequently to see the kids and us. I am stuck as when my mother enters my life, in quotes, it usually results in separation with my wife. Can I show up for my wife and work out these issues with my mom at the same time? I don't think so. That's a lot. Thank you for sharing that. And we got the right guy to help with this. So
Yeah. Tammy, I chuckled at your editorializing there. You're right on. No, it's not possible. And here's why. In situations like this, where there's any kind of enmeshment or inappropriate boundaries with a parent, the thing that is in threat in the relationship, we call it primacy. And when you have a committed relationship, one of the main sources of safety is knowing I'm your number one and you're my number one. That means any other priority will not take precedent over my safety. Now think about it. If you're going to give yourself vulnerably to a relationship, what kind of a deal is it for you when your partner says to you, "You're my number one unless it's football season," or "You're my number one unless mom is around," or "You're my number one unless, I don't know, I want to look at porn." Like, all sorts of things can come in and overtake that primacy. Human beings cannot multitask. I'm going to say that definitively. And I don't care if you've read studies where there's outliers. Do not think you can multitask in a relationship and you can make everybody win, because if you and your partner do not pick winners and losers, everybody will lose. So what that means for your relationship is, if you do not pick your relationship as the priority, this is the prime spot in my life, everything else falls in order after this. The truth for a bonded family, especially if you brought children into it, your parents are like number 5 on the priority list. That's as high as they can go. Anything else, it's going to get upside down. It's going to get backwards. So no, you can't work on the stuff with your mom and your spouse at the same time. The order of operations here is, first, you have to work on the guilt and the obligation you feel towards mom that's behind that question in the first place. In other words, you have to get yourself ready to let mom down by saying, "Listen, I know you want things from me and my family. We're not on your timeline, and we'll consider requests from you, but we are going to respond with what's best for us." That's what's, you have to reconcile yourself to be able to let mom down and have your own boundaries there that protect the primacy of your relationship, if you want your relationship. Then the second order of operations is you and your spouse coming together and deciding how you are going to handle the intrusions and how you're going to handle the boundaries together. Then the third part is if a conversation needs to happen with the parent, just so you know, here's what you can expect from us. That's the order of operations. If you do any of those out of order, you'll mess it up. I will put in a plug here too, that's the flow of the workshops we have with overcoming enmeshment. Level 1 and level 2 enmeshment workshops are for men to disentangle themselves from guilt and obligation and get clear on what they want in their relationships. We have a workshop for couples we've been running for a little over a year now that's about the couple coming together and saying, post enmeshment, in the aftermath of enmeshment, here's the course we want to plot together to avoid these troublesome compromises, to avoid throwing our relationship under the bus in favor of a parent or a family's need. So I hope that gets to the parts of the question, doesn't it, Tammy?
yeah, I that's a great job. And it wasn't even editorializing it. He added, "I don't think so," to that.
Oh,
So it wasn't me, because I always, I'm always looking for, I mean, it's challenging. I'm like, wow, because yes, there's a parental relationship, and then there's, the grandparents. I mean, it's so complicated, but I love that you were very practical. This is the order that, that we need to address this. And, it's what I read really clearly with this is, if mom, then wife is gone. I mean, like, there's an automatic separation. So that tells how and hurtful that is. And so, so I think that was a great lineup of, so there's hope for you and your wife and your family unit. Follow his guidelines, please. Okay. Is this model downloadable? If you're looking for that, I have the email. So if you are looking for that, email me and I will gladly send that to you. But I don't have a way of adding it to this. So if that graphic is what you're looking for, please, please do. Um, and they said they just discovered your thank you for sharing podcasts, and they're awesome. Okay, so the next question: my partner is in early recovery and doing well. Love hearing that. I'm seeing real improvements. How can I share and manage the fear I have of the future that is now changed because of his addiction? I don't know this was or I didn't know this was happening, and this has changed how I feel about the future. I used to be hopeful and carefree, and now I understand it's truly unknown. When I tell him how I feel, we both get sad. Thanks for your guidance.
Yeah, thank you for that really thoughtful look into your life. My first thought is, when I bring this up, when we talk about we both get sad, I think how appropriate. Keep in mind that feelings like sadness or anger or anxiety are not bad in and of themselves. They're not always a sign that something's wrong. I'll tell you, as a parent, I can look at this world on a lot of different levels. I can look at micro, I can look at the future, I can look at, the immediate present. And I am so all over the board in my feelings about my kids and the world that they're going to inherit. That's not a sign that something's wrong, because they're going to inherit a very complicated world with serious problems. And being sad about that seems appropriate. If you guys are looking at a relationship where, based on what you knew, you could be carefree and you could be open, and then lies were discovered and you realize they can't be, that's a loss. And losses make us feel sad. The thing to watch in your relationship is, can we both see this as a loss? Can we both recognize we don't have what we ought to have right now? Or that ability to, forgive my language here, that ability to be naive about the risks that we face together. We don't have that anymore. The curtains have come down. Again, that's a real loss. It doesn't mean that you will never ever have that ability again. You just can't get it through the way you had it before. The way you had it before is, I didn't think this was a problem. I didn't think I had to worry about this. You can get the security again, but the security comes through, we know what the problems are, we know what the issues are, and we are 100% committed to working together on that. So the security comes from a different place. The ability to let down your guard comes from a different place. Not, I didn't have to worry about it. It's, we worried about it, we got to work, and we created something that I would argue was safer than what you had before. We've addressed all of the knowns and the unknowns, and we know what to do. We know how to build this relationship in a way that works for us.
Yeah, and I think the carefree was a false carefree, because he knew he was acting out, so you didn't. So I hear consistently from couples who are really doing this work that it's a way more honest, eyes wide open, and there's some sadness around it. I put in the chat the couples healing from betrayal work group. We'll start it again after the first of the year. I should have that posted next week, but part of that work is grieving losses together, and there is the loss of what we thought we had, who we thought we were, who we hoped we were, all of that. But man, you can build something. It was a false facade, that you were, operating with previously. So, but I love hearing that he's in early recovery and doing well. That's, that's a hopeful thing. So,
The fact that you're sad together, I would say, puts you well ahead of the pack, and you're already past a lot of problems. If you can be sad together instead of I'm sad and he's angry.
yes, I mean, so much of what you shared today, I've talked to multiple partners this morning, and the defensiveness, the even bullying, like, yeah, rather than being able to be vulnerable and tolerate, talking about feelings, and and staying in that above the line, place. It's goes right to, well, I think like all of the negative that just keeps that line probably a lot more solid, rather than bringing, the couple together. So, okay, my porn addict husband is currently in therapy with a CSAT, but is not in any other groups or support groups, or anything like that. We are 4 years since D-Day, but we each only started seeing our therapist about 6 months ago. I am now realizing that I never really stated my requests of him and stated my boundaries. So my question is, what language would you use for that request? Literally, would I ask? He is very resistant to joining a support group. Continue in the next comment, partly because he doesn't own the fact that he's a porn addict. I know I can only control myself. So sorry. I can only control myself, but for my safety, I need him to have someone else he can speak to throughout the week if anything comes up for him, not just therapist once for 45 minutes a week, and definitely not me. He is very resentful about my not being able to support him at this time. He acknowledges that I can't support him through a slip up, but why not in other areas? He thinks it's just a vindictive choice. That's a lot. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all that. So let's unpack it.
So as far as what do I say, the last half of that, just cut and paste it. Really, I think that's very to the point. It doesn't feel safe for me, and remember that part of your job, I call it phase one of relationship healing. Part of your job as the betrayed partner in phase one is to lay out the terms under which you will consider continuing in the relationship, either as it was or period. So if part of that is I need you in regular support, I want you in a group, it doesn't make sense to me to consider being close and safe to you when it appears to me that you're inadequately supported. And the betraying partner's job in phase one is to get the request list and either say, you've got it, I will make these happen because I'm serious about restoring trust and helping our relationship, or be very clear, I'm not interested in doing this, which is tantamount, there's no other way to slice it. That's the same thing as saying, I'm not interested in you feeling any safer. There's no other way to slice it. And it's okay if you're the betraying partner and you're really not interested. Don't drag everybody through a long, protracted, ambivalent time. Just come out and say it. So either commit to it and do it, or say that you're not going to commit to it and let your partner move on. So again, as far as saying it, you did a really good job in that of noting, here are my feelings, here's what I'm asking for from you. The other part that I was thinking about made me think of Dr. Rob's book, Out of the Doghouse. That whole, you think I'm being vindictive. I would say just about 100% of the time that comes from a view from the person who's done the betraying, that comes from a self-centered view. Which having a view that's centered on ourselves isn't necessarily wrong. We need that to be part of a relationship, but you also have to consider from your partner's perspective. So in my men's group, just the other night, one guy came in his check-in. He had a lot of complaints about how his wife was treating him, and why she didn't want to be close. And he's a little newer to recovery. And one of the seasoned guys, he said, "Let me put it to you this way: if you were to go next door and just beat the daylights out of your neighbor, doesn't matter why, but you beat him to a pulp. And then let's say you go back home and you really do start feeling remorse and you realize you did something wrong. How do you think your neighbor's going to respond when you show up at his door the next day and say, I'm really sorry, we ought to start over?" And the guy said, I would feel lucky if I got to the doorstep. He would have every right to call the police, to attack me. I'd feel lucky if I even got to the doorstep. And the seasoned guy said to the other guy, you have to understand that you've done something worse than beating the daylights out of your partner. So you're going to need to understand for a little while that it doesn't make sense for her to be close to you. And you've really got to let her take her time and do her process. Because you sitting there and pounding down the door and saying it's time to get over this, that's about you. You have to consider how it's going for her. And it will work better if you patiently wait and you do everything you can to make sure that when she opens the door to see, like, can I be a part of this relationship, that she opens the door to something that's really, really wonderful for her and for you. So that's what I would say about that second part is read out of the doghouse. It does a really good job at talking about this is why your partner's responding this way. This is why they feel this way. And I really left Dr. Rob's candor. He essentially, sends a message over and over and get over yourself and think about what you've done to this person that you're saying that you love.
And great information. I put some links. We have a Porn Addiction 101 work group starting on a Saturday on the Seeking Integrity site. The Betrayed Partner group starts again in January. Out of the Doghouse. All of those, there's 6-week-long courses, live facilitated, so they're not just watching a video, and then there's some of the guys do connect, with peers. You said, I realize now that I never, did something. I was talking with people earlier today and I was like, there is no, you didn't get a manual so that when we're X amount of years in our relationship, I'm going to have this discovery and I'm going to magically know how to address this like a qualified professional. Like this is tough stuff. And so I'm going to ask you to give yourself some grace. I love that you're here asking for, how do I do this now? And Jon is right. Dr. Rob does talk about, if I'm victimizing, oh, poor me, instead of paying attention to how does that neighbor feel that got beat up, like it's like, oh, the neighbor won't be friends with me. That's kind of how this is, oh, the neighbor won't be friends, and so it's still, oh, poor me, rather than, wow, having the ability to look beyond that. So we talk often about, healthy boundaries, and it's not punitive. It's what do I need for my physical safety, financial safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety. How do you value yourself enough to go, this is what I need, and they aren't, just, oh, I want this and want that. It's like, I need this for my personal self.
And it's very okay as you start working on these layers to discover something that you need that you didn't know about on day one. That's back to my comment when Tammy asks, is there this kind of dynamic in relationships? Even a seasoned professional doesn't know exactly what their clients need from day one. Seasoned professionals who have a program, it's their best guess. It's generally. But as far as what you need specifically, that's discovered along the way. And it's 300% okay that you realize at this point, this is actually really important to me. And that's part of your job in phase one, is to keep your partner up to date on what you're discovering about your needs and what will help you to feel safe and what would help make sense for you to reconsider full partnership in the relationship.
Well, and there's lots of research. We do better pair bonded, but that's in a healthy relationship where we both believe that the other person has our back and that we're moving forward, in a real and meaningful way. And life is finite. Don't we want joy in our, don't we want joy and connection? In addiction, we don't. We want to be able to do what, the little tiny world that is our, active addiction. And it gets complex. It's, shame and all of those other things. But at the end of the day, if we're brave enough to take that step and get the help that we need, it's transformative for us. It's transformative for our loved ones. It's transformative across relationships. The stuff that Jon is sharing isn't just for primary relationships. All of this is how we can connect with people. I mean, I love that our program is called Seeking Integrity. We personally strive for integrity, for us, for our relationships, and we want to help, clients have that too. But in integrity, I show up in real and vulnerable ways, and sometimes, I'll get my feelings hurt, and that's okay, because it still gives me a place to navigate and be able to say, gosh, that, I'm feeling hurt by that. And some of it is, do I own it? I mean, like, is there some part of me? Or sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't even know that, and how can we do this differently? And then we're at a deeper level. We're more connected, because, it isn't just like, well, that person always does this to me. Like the mailman example, he always throws my mail in my mailman literally gives my mail to the neighbor one street over all the time. And I just have to go, this is just how it is, and he's not doing it to me personally. It just, so anyway, it was funny though when you were using the mailman analogy, and I was like, oh, I have mailman stories. So yeah, anyway. Oh, okay. So the next one, I have said and done all the wrong things. My wife is ready to divorce me. How can I course correct this and save my marriage?
That's a hard one. What I would say to that is, more important than your marriage is a secure, functioning relationship. I'm assuming there's children involved here. If there's not, this still applies. Secure functioning doesn't mean that we're married and we love each other. It means that we give one another the truth, we deal with each other honestly, and nobody has anybody else chained in the basement. Meaning, we realize that this relationship is completely voluntary and it's conditional. That's what adult love relationships are. There is no such thing as unconditional love for adults. Everybody has their limits. So I would recommend, because I think you'll continue to do and say the wrong things if your goal is to save the marriage. I think your goal has to be to turn yourself into the kind of person that you should have been all along, and to recognize that your clock may have run out with your partner. You don't know. I don't know. They may not know. So if you focus on saving the marriage, you'll stay short-sighted. If you focus on where you went wrong and what you're going to do to correct that, and letting your partner make choices for themselves about what they're going to do, you have a much better shot at a relationship that functions securely. That may include a marriage that continues, it might not. But I think it's important to accept that I always tell my guys who come from the same place, you didn't know this at the time of the addiction, but you were playing roulette. You didn't know who your partner was or how they would respond to this. And now that the bullet has left the chamber, you've got what you've got. So there is no use in going back and saying, I wish my spouse would respond this way, or why can't we this, or why can't we that? Your job in your recovery is to deal with consequences as they are. So if the marriage is ready to end, that's your partner's choice. I hope, regardless of the status of your marriage, I hope you'll work on becoming the person you should have been all along. That's how you make amends, not just to your partner, but to the world that you've lived in and taken from all these years. That's what I would say is more important than whether or not your marriage continues, is, are you actually going to correct the imbalance in the universe? And again, part of that would be understanding that the choice is in your partner's lap. And, like I said before, you can work on making, if your partner decides to poke their head out of the front door again and see what's this going to be like, you can work really hard to make it a very good thing for them to come out to. But at the end of the day, it's their choice whether or not they want to open the door to you again, and you have to accept that.
She adds, I continue to tell my husband what I need, and his response is to reject. He continues to use disloyalty bind as an excuse and is ripping me apart, yet he says he wants to repair.
So here's where I've noticed this in the couples that I work with. nearly 100% of the couples that come into my office say we want a better relationship, and nearly 100% don't want feedback from their partner. I don't know how you're going to get a better relationship with an individual if you don't take feedback from them and if you don't take what they're saying seriously.
And the pattern will continue. I mean, if this relationship doesn't, and I don't know what will happen, but if this relationship does not continue until and unless we do the work on ourselves to be a different person, we'll bring that to another relationship. So the onus is always on us to do the tough work to change. So we have one more question. I want to share with my SA husband how I feel about what his actions have done to me, but when I do, he goes to shame and depression and shouts me out. How can I share my feelings without bringing up his shame? He suffers from chronic depression and is on medication.
Here's what I'm wondering. It makes me think of like an overall disclosure process. I'm certainly not of the opinion that sharing feelings should have to wait for the impact part of a disclosure, but I wonder if you guys have been through that, if he's given full honesty, and if you've been able to share impact. Because one of the things that happens is two people do that well, as they prepare for it well, his ability to confront shame is very much impacted by his ability to get honest. So I'm thinking first step, I'm thinking full disclosure. Has that happened? I'm also thinking about consent. And this might sound weird. I apologize if this is painful what I say. Does he want to hear it? And does he know that he wants to hear it? I get the feeling, or I get the perspective of you've hurt me and you don't get a choice in whether you hear it or not. That would be just, right? You broke it, you fix it. You broke it, this is your load. One thing that I've noticed about folks who tend to be really reactive to shame and they close up with it, a lot of times if there is an advanced invitation, advanced notice, hey, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, or I'd like to share with you for 5 minutes about how I'm feeling, could you be ready for that? That can go a ways in helping him get to a place where he can set aside the reactions, or he can get support in setting aside the automaticity of the shame or whatever. He can talk to a sponsor beforehand. He can have some therapy sessions to prepare himself. Again, it's what I go back to. It gets really hard to deal with feelings when we feel like it's got to be dealt with right now. And I understand where that urgency comes from, but you really have to make sure that it's that urgent if it's going to be, we got to deal with this right now. I hope that helps.
Well, they added no disclosure yet, and he will do one he said he would do one 2 years ago, but still not there. I mean, that is,
you got to, so if you want an improvement on shame, on trauma, you actually have to push. There has to be pressure. Development doesn't happen unless there's pain. And I think it's important too to look at the data, the overall, not just have we done it, but how have we approached doing it, or how have you approached doing it? If there's 2 years of I'll do it and I haven't, I mean, that says something.
yeah. Oh, that one breaks my heart to, I mean, that's, you're left hanging. Dr. Rob talks about this all the time. It's like, and maybe that's data, that he's so unwilling. So I put in the chat, nothing changes if nothing changes. And, and although I say that, and there's the caveat of, but the pain, can continue to increase for both of you. So we're out of time. Thank you, Jon. It was great to see you. Thank you all for the great questions. If you want that graphic, email me, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity. I'm happy to send that along as well. So see you. Bye-bye.
See you in December.